That's right, Bill.
I know it's an old meme, but I still can't. I still laugh my ass off.
Okay. I am now live, and I need to just quickly look at my stream, and there's 2 people watching. That's amazing. There's 3 people, so I'm going to be sharing this on Facebook and stuff for a second. And so you guys should introduce yourselves. There's 3 people. Spacepan is not here. And why don't you say who you are and what we're going to be talking about? Everybody's been on before, though. These are people that if you watch this show very commonly, you're going to recognize.
All right. I'm Nick Redding, formerly of Men's Rights Edmonton. Right now, I guess the last project that I worked on was non-feminist or anti-feministpraxis.com, but that kind of went nowhere. My current YouTube channel is non-humanitarian anti-feminism, formerly Men's Rights Edmonton. We did the Don't Be with Men's Rights Edmonton. We did the Don't Be That Girl poster campaign, which got off the charts popularity in 2013. We've worked with Karen Strawn. Look, check out our channel. You can see all the people we've worked with. Yeah.
I'm John. I'm with Visions of Color Audiozone, just a podcast that kind of randomly looks at different stuff. I've done some work in the men's rights field, and I've probably sucked about 30 dicks in my lifetime, so I've got some skin in the game. And then
that's it.
That's sorry. I'm a lightweight, I guess.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's it for me.
Right on. So my name is Patrick Lockwood. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm a published author. My book behind me there is The Fear Problem, and I'm here to talk about whatever I can pitch in about, essentially. I'm a teacher, a professor, I'm a therapist, I'm a consultant, a researcher. I just do it all.
All right.
Hey, great talk.
It's been good.
Right. Yeah.
Good seeing you guys.
Hey, everyone. Hey, are we experiencing technical difficulties with Prince?
You there, dude?
Is he there? Are we here?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm
you, John
I was
Williams?
muted. I'm posting things on Twitter and stuff. So just one more second, and then I'm totally ready. Okay.
So to maybe give some backstory, last week I was on Prince's channel here, and I talked a lot. Basically, when I was talking a lot about the culture war, and I see feminism as central to the problem. I sort of busted out a lot of understanding of psychology, and so I was asked if I would like to speak to, quote, a gay psychologist.
I'm technically bi, but whatever.
Yeah, well, you know, on the internet we're all gay cats anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I mean, well, never mind. Is this on, like, is it going to be on YouTube?
Yeah.
It's already on YouTube.
Okay, so I can't say what I want then. Okay, good.
Sure, you can say whatever you want. I'm going to say whatever I want.
No.
I don't think so. I'm
there's no tomorrow.
I'm mostly trolling 4chan and shit all day, so I don't know if I should say everything that I want. But the last time I was on, I think I inadvertently advertently said the N-word.
Oh boy!
And I don't apologize for that, but I don't want to fuck with Prince's channel.
Yeah. Okay, so if anyone's watching this in the watch link, so yeah, we were talking last week about two different things that had to do with psychology.
Okay.
The main one was that we were talking about this sort of mass hysteria or mass personality disorder type phenomenon that seems to happen with feminists and other social justice types. But, feminists, like all social justice people are feminists. You don't really find non-feminist ones. And that's really a shame, because if there was ever a chance that these people could be good, it's not going to happen if they're feminists, because feminism is literally just the exact opposite of the truth. Men are legally, systemically, and by every statistical metric disadvantaged. There's like nothing that there's so few female issues, as Spacepan likes to put it, and I agree with. The most important feminist issue is less important than the least important male issue. Or women's issue really is not as important as even the least important male issue. And so these people aren't really going to help if they see the world through this lens where they get to say, oh, black men are not oppressed really that much. They're only oppressed because they're black, but they're privileged because they're male, and black trans women have it the worst of all, supposedly, even though they don't even get murdered. Like, they get murdered a fraction of the rate as black men, actually.
Aren't black men supposed to be the white men, right, of black men?
White straight men, yeah, according to the Root. Maybe it was Very Smart Brothers, which is a part of the Root.
Sorry.
Yeah, oh god, I know. Every time I ever see that blog or sub,
You're so smart. Just learn how to fucking spell.
Yeah, it's so embarrassing. And they're wrong about literally everything. It's one of those social justice blogs that's just like, this is just demonstrably untrue every time. So, yeah, but the thing is about feminism is that it really trains people to behave in a way that is just so incredibly selfish, so paranoid, so just, wallowing in their own victimhood or alleged victimhood and feeling like they're a constant victim, that it really, really brings out the worst in people in a large group, and it normalizes that behavior with each other. And people believe very strongly, and people who were around, for a long time, like Erin Pizzey, the founder of the world's first domestic violence shelter, who was not, she considered herself a feminist. This was in 1971 when she founded it. She wasn't a feminist, but she thought it was something else, and so
no. Let me clear the record here right now.
Okay.
Erin Pizzey she's English by nationality, but her father was a diplomat. She was raised in China, and when she came back to the UK and attended a couple of feminist meetings, because as a young mother, she had to have other young mother friends to help raise her kids, and she went to one of these feminist meetings. They immediately reminded her of the consciousness raising meetings under Maoist China.
Okay, so she wasn't.
And she has gone on record being very, very clear about this.
Yeah.
But yes, she did start the women's shelter, the domestic violence shelter movement.
And she let feminists get in there, get their foot in the door.
So what happened there was she started it independent of the feminist movement.
Yeah.
And then the feminist movement saw what she did and did exactly what we identified last episode. Last time we were talking. They see a field of endeavor and they decide that it's fucking theirs. If it doesn't matter. Last week you were talking to me about how they colonized the gay community, and I was telling you they do that with every community.
Yeah, which I already knew, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and so no, so yeah, Aaron Pitsey started the Chiswick Women's Shelter. Feminists saw that. They saw that if they claimed it for their own, they could use this very legitimate cause to solidify their doctrinal claims that they incessantly push on the public. And so now, fast forward, 40 years later, every single domestic violence shelter is. You don't even have to research it. You know that it is a brick and mortar extension of feminist ideology. And just like and that same process is extending to, if it hasn't fully extended, to police, media, academia, and government.
Yeah, and I mean, you did miss a few things that definitely happened. Like, for example, like somehow they got themselves in, and she didn't realize that they were there, because I remember her specifically saying that. And then they demanded that they have this model of domestic violence thing that they believe, which is all about patriarchy. Only men can attack women. Women only act in self-defense. Women are never violent, supposedly, and males just can't be around ever. And so they made it so that like young boys, because it was for all people. It had beds for like some number of beds for males, and
they made it so that boys over the age of 12,
yeah,
or 11,
and and she also they demanded that she agree that only women can be violent, or only men can be violent, rather. And she had an extremely violent and abusive mother, and she actually had been violent for a long time in her early life. And so she actually had very good relationships with the women who were violent themselves, which was about like 60% of them. And they were either as violent as the men that they were in relationships with, or more violent. And they were also violent to each other and their children, and the children of other residents or people who are staying there, children. And so she was like, no, I need to help these women, because these are the women who have major issues, and I can connect with them because I've been through that. And they were like, no, you have to do that. And so then they, just started terrorizing her until she left. And I don't even remember, why did I bring up that subject? Do you guys remember what segue that was?
Nope, too long ago.
I don't know. You had not yet made the segue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I have a question for Mr. Lockwood.
Sure.
That's okay.
You can call me Patrick if you want.
Patrick, sorry, thank you.
It's not that fancy.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of curious what you think is the cause of, the meaning behind, and the ultimate outcome of this power struggle between men and women that's been occurring socially over the last 40 or 50 years.
So I think it's really complex.
I asked this within the context of your having written about human conflict with the fear problem. I mean, we were kind of touching on that earlier. Yeah.
I think the short answer is not going to be satisfactory, which is there's so many things. There are a couple of simple things you can point to, which you'd have to elaborate on for about 6 or 7 hours to actually get the full truth of things. So one of the things that I would point to...
Let's not do a 6 or 7 hour live stream.
Right. Me neither. I don't think I could. But there's a couple of things that shifted in society in the United States specifically, just talking about one country on the planet. So the first thing that shifted was the focus on individual to group think. And that came about because of a number of things. It came about because of political changes from the 50s through the 80s. It came about because back in the 30s, the Frankfurt School moved from Europe over to, I think it was Colombia, and right about 35 or something like that, after the Nazis kicked them out, because the critical theorists were too critical, essentially, of everything that was going on in Europe, and the Nazis didn't want that around. So the problem is they had this very radical ideology that kind of created what most of us call nowadays the postmodernist, or what Jordan Peterson calls the postmodern neo-Marxist, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I want to clear a teeny bit of up. They were the proto developers of postmodernism. Like, right. they had.
I think ContraPoints had actually a very good critique of Jordan Peterson. That was the only one that she had, which was that the concept of postmodern neo-Marxism is kind of nebulous. It's
no, that's not true. That's not true at all. That's no, like every like almost like probably over 75% of the postmodernists who really you would define, like the Frankfurt School were all Marxists, and then something like 50-60% of the other people who really coined it were either Marxists, like full-blown Marxists, or were at some point and well into their adult life, Marxists, and were taught by Marxist scholars and stuff. And so the idea that these things are somehow, like, supposedly it's contradictory, it's really not. If you actually, I have a whole script that I've been meaning to make into a video. It's kind of long, about how these things work together, and it definitely.
I think the way in which the term postmodern neo-Marxism is used is meaningless. It's a very nebulous, vague concept with no content or meaning.
No, it's not true though. No, I think. Well, it means that people are, they have Marxist values. Did you ever watch my video "Intersectional Feminism as Communist Particle Board"?
Yeah.
Okay, so it means that people have Marxist values, like all these different things that were passed down through both things that are still Marxists with people, which people read. There's all sorts of scholars and stuff who cite, or if you would even call them that, like feminist theorists and stuff, who cite Marx and Engels as influences, like a whole bunch. And then it got morphed with postmodernism because they needed a way to
What is postmodernism?
Okay, postmodernism is a very complicated concept. It's hard to really it's
not really.
What?
It's really not complicated.
Thank you.
It comes down to the belief that there is no absolute truth, and that
it is more complicated than that. I want to give it a stab. That's sort of part of it, but it's basically that that truth is written by the powerful because they're, like the victors always write the history. And so supposedly objective data is almost unanimously flawed because the people who don't have power never are given a chance to speak, and therefore for them to live in a world that is oppressing them, which is basically everybody is considered oppressed in some degree, and there's certain privileged groups, the oppressed people, which is not very clearly defined. That's the thing about it. I
don't think the problem is that I don't think any of this is clearly defined. You have to define what postmodernism versus modernism, and then you have to define Marxism versus neo-Marxism. And then when you combine all that, it's something that's virtually, and I think Noam Chomsky put it best, it's virtually incomprehensible for the average individual in popular discussion to really.
I'll agree with that. I will agree with that. But I've done a lot of reading about it, and it's definitely a thing. It's basically the postmodernism came in there to justify having Marxist stances in a way that could apply to social dynamics and all sorts of other things. And because you can't objectively make the argument that Marxism is even worthwhile anymore. And so you have to start being like, oh, well, you know, Stalin was a white male and blah, 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 blah. And also there was no representation. There was very little representation in leadership from women, and that could have messed with things. And, you know, like just...
Well, I still think that's a valid criticism of Jordan Peterson in his indictment of these postmodern neo-Marxists as being the impetus for the problems that we're experiencing now. I mean, I think if anything, that the actual causes of these problems are they make the concept of postmodern neo-Marxism seem simple by comparison.
And it's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say so either. I would say that there's a lot of circumstance. Like, I would say that the financial crash was such a huge one because people were looking to blame somebody. And
like in what year was that? The 2008 one under Obama or whatever.
Well, yeah, people say it sort of started. I mean, it started when the housing market crashed. And I guess that was starting right at the end of Bush or something. But yeah, that one.
Okay.
And so, yeah, people were looking for someone to blame, and it was so easy to blame, you know, really, really anybody. Like, if you lived in San Francisco, everybody was blaming the tech workers who were mostly white, and, you know, it was easy to be like, well, you guys have money because...
the cis white male, right?
Yeah, stuff like that. But yeah, you know, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about this. I should really make that video because it's like, you know, 4 pages long, maybe a little bit into 5 pages. And it does explain, you know, how these two things work together. And because I realize I should make a real clear clarification of how these things work because it is so.
I think Marxism itself is, or you know, it's something of a complicated perversion of like communism, and so it's like to extrapolate from that and to go into neo-Marxism, it's like that takes it to, it's like next level complication kind of shit.
Well, yeah, but most people
like
think
the
of
metaphysics of Kant.
Most people think of communism or Marxism just as communism.
Can I say Kant? Is that can I say Kant on YouTube? Is that too close to?
I don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
Anyhow, you know, I want to move on though, because I don't remember why we talked about. Do you remember why you brought that up?
Well, no, I was asking Mr. Lockwood about what he thinks are the causes, meaning, and ultimate endpoint of this conflict between men and women that has been occurring over the last 30, 40, 50 years. And particularly given that he has been writing about human conflict and the fear problem, I guess.
Yes. So the gist is there's a couple of main drivers. So one of them is the fact that this, I would call it critical theory ideology, which came out of the Frankfurt School and started to infest feminism. It started to infest social sciences. It started to infest philosophy, different departments. It kind of infested society kind of very, very small and insidiously. We didn't really notice it happening from the 50s onward. So that's the first problem. The second problem, from my point of view, is we've just generally focused away from an individualistic notion of like a pragmatic ability to function to more group-oriented, like your group identity matters more. And that started a long, long time ago. Had nothing to do with anything that happened in the 80s or the 90s. It was a long time ago. And then the other thing is we just have this technology that allows us to connect to people that we shouldn't necessarily be connecting to people. So there's this idea that we should kind of be global in the sense that we should be able to function with each other in a global way. And that's just not how we're designed. I mean, our last, to my knowledge at least, our last...
Well, really but diversity is our strength.
It is a strength. Diversity is 100. I mean, if you talk to any geneticist or any evolutionary biologist, diversity is 100%.
I'm kidding when I say that, though. I don't really believe that.
I'm talking about.
I don't. Yeah.
I'm talking about genetic diversity. Genetic diversity is extremely useful because it allows the better genes to kind of thrive in the gene pool. So, but that's a different conversation. But what I really mean is, this idea that we should be so worried about different groups of people all over the world. There's a great book you all should read by Paul Bloom, a guy over at Yale, a professor. It's called Against Empathy, The Case for Rational Compassion, because we can feel really bad for one kid over in Uganda and want to donate $100 right now. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we should. That $100 is probably much better spent on something right here in our own backyard, probably for your own life, as opposed to someone else's. And that's the problem with empathy, is that it makes us kind of act in such altruistic ways for people that don't really matter to who we are and what we're doing.
Those people called, I believe they're referred to as NIMBYs, right? Not in my own backyard. This idea of people who advocate for causes like environmentalism that are implementable in places other than where they live. I
have something I want to say about that.
Sure.
I when it comes to empathy, I think that the reason that people empathize with some poor backward tribe from wherever, or even groups like the gays or the women or the blacks, the reason that they empathize with some sort of nebulous, almost purely theoretical, so some group of they empathize with these people in the abstract, right? But then if they come face to face with a gay person or whatever, they're unable to empathize with that person as an individual.
Possibly.
And so I think that people see themselves, or at least they've been chastised as lacking. Those people who lack empathy, they have been chastised for their lack of empathy, and so now they want to show everyone, they want to show the world that they really do care.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, virtue signaling is a big deal, and there's a great book that just came out by Jeffrey Miller, the evolutionary psychologist, that you all should get. It's about virtue signaling, and because it's one of those things it's one of those instincts that we inherited that we're not going to get rid of, and it's just about using that. It's about using the instinct correctly and using it in such a way that's adaptive for your current circumstance, not in a way that's going to fuck you over, right? Because we're never going to not virtue signal, and we're never going to not be tribal. It's just a matter of making sure that our tribal identity is in balance with our individual identity, and that's one of the things I talked about in my book. We're overly focused on our group identity nowadays, and that's not new.
It would seem that tribalism would be more closely related to the concept of empathy. I mean, it's people who are directly related to you.
Yeah, and that's what we've needed for 360,000 years since humans have been around in whatever iteration. We've needed a tribe to survive, and only in the last 10 or 15,000 years we've had larger, more collective societies, which breaks beyond the tribe in which our brain was formed. So our instincts are built for a more primitive world than we're currently living in. And that's one of our problems, is that we're kind of looking at modern society in such a way through old lenses, and we can't really keep up with the demands of what we're focusing on. We have no blueprint for Twitter, none. We have no clue how to interact with it, but we do it in such a way that it betrays our primitive instincts.
Well, what are your opinions on Twitter? I mean, personally, I think it's kind of a dumpster fire of ideologies, but
it is.
It seems very chaotic. There's no organization to it, and it seems mob rule-ish.
It is. It is, and again, at the end of the day, that's how we would operate if you took a bunch of tribal people and put them in a giant collective where they're not used to functioning. That's exactly what would happen. But I think there's utility to things like Facebook and Twitter and Gab and all those things, because it is going to push us.
Is social diversity a strength?
Of course, because it means genetic diversity. You can't have one without the other. So the problem for me is, are we overly emphasizing the social diversity in an unrealistic way? Do you absolutely have to be friends with 5 gay people as well as 5 straight people? That makes zero sense. There's no good evolutionary theory for why that would make sense. But when you are faced with diversity, can you, let's say, capitalize on that and make it useful for your development and for your intellect and for your like schema of how the world works? Absolutely. That would be my goal. Is not to say that you have to be, but if it does show up in your backyard, how do you deal with it? And do you use it in such an advantageous way?
I have two
requires
questions.
A certain degree of intelligence that some people don't seem to have to be able to cope with that level of diversity, right?
I have two questions. So, and you can answer them in whatever order.
Okay.
So, I'm curious about first, the people who very, very obviously overcompensate. Like we were kind of talking about this before, but people who, you know, like, okay, living in Seattle people are totally racist. They have no idea how to like actually just interact with black people like they're their friends. But they overcompensate so incredibly hard. Like if there was a rule book for all the things that you had to do to not be racist, they would all order it. You know, I mean, there's already books that are kind of like that. And they read them, and it's so obvious to me because it's like, no, you guys aren't even barely treating them like they're human. You know, like it's like, because, you know, I grew up in schools that were mostly black, so it's always very awkward to me. And so there's that question, and then the other question is, what do you think about feminists who like only care about women's issues? They don't really, like, they probably say, you know, like they care about other social justice issues, but it's like the only things that you can tell, like, really actually they actually care about are women's issues and other women that they perceive as being, you know, in pain or having some bad thing happen to them.
Yeah, I mean, those are two pretty big questions, and let me see if I can at least bite off a corner from both of them.
Okay.
So let's start with the feminism thing. So I think we'd have to decide, like, which iteration of feminism. If you're talking about, like, first wave, second wave, third wave feminism, those are different schools of thought.
Fourth wave.
Right, okay, so that's kind of what everyone in the, at least socially conservative world, considers the sick version of feminism. So I would say the first wave version of feminism, like the Clara Barton's, the original, like, you know, Red Cross, right? Those kinds of people have a perfectly valid focus on making sure that women are legitimately protected when there are systemic issues or when there are individual issues happening where they're abused, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
A few of them were. A lot of them were actually heinous people if you go through history. And the ones who were particularly good are mostly left out of history.
Absolutely. And just a real simple point for everyone who ever watches this is that if someone you know or someone you look up to or someone you've heard about or read about did something great, they were probably terribly sick people. There's no famous person, there's no innovative person who was a perfectly healthy person. I'm here to say, as a clinical psychologist, you can't be great and healthy at the same time. Those are mutually exclusive things. It's not
the demagogues typically have something fucked up going on there.
Even if you're not a demagogue,
at least something. Well,
you could be Gandhi, you could be Buddha. It doesn't matter. You're sick. Sick is part of the game. Sickness drives you to do great things.
Yeah. I'll go a step further and say that sanity is a delusion.
Well, sure. That's a different discussion that could take about 4 hours.
I think Sigmund Freud would agree with that.
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, but again, to make sure I focus on this particular topic. So the fourth wave feminists specifically, if you're talking about the people who are so reactionary and over-interpret everything because of what I would describe earlier as the critical theory that infested feminism.
And then very obsessed with power.
Right.
Well, if it's the sick one, then we could refer to it as, like, say, the post-third wave, right?
Sure, or you just call it fourth wave. Whatever word works. I'm not really caught up on categories.
Wait, isn't the fourth wave supposed to be when third wave feminists took to social media in order to?
Yeah. because third wave feminism had mostly kind of died out by the mid to late 2000s, and then around 2008 it started to come back, but it didn't really get popular until about 2012 or so.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't speak to any of that because that's not my branch. I mean, the only person in the feminist world that I'm even remotely familiar with is Camille Paglia. She's the only person.
I love Camille Paglia.
Yeah, she's the only one I actually like because she's the only one that is so focused and demands that women deserve, equal rights and equal responsibilities.
Which is
I like how Sexual Personae was particularly dense, but she does go on at length in Sexual Personae about not just the failures of feminism in the modern culture, but also the collapse of the what. And Gibbon actually wrote about it also, and I think in that book that he wrote about Rome, but the late phases of culture and the various dysfunctions that we see in culture that lead up to that.
Sure.
Okay, but I want to let you finish.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally speaking, what I would say is the more modern iterations that have really been infested by critical theory and the radical versions of critical theory, because critical theory in and of itself is not particularly sick. What's sick is how people capitalize on it when you start to mix in what Jordan Peterson would call the neo-Marxist attitude, right? The power division, class warfare view of the world, which again is a broad overgeneralization of Marx. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there's this weird sickness that shows up with what we call modern feminists, where they are so overly focused on this classism between males and females, or men and women, whatever word you like, that they totally obfuscate the nuances of what it means to be an individual person. Because me as a male, I might have certain advantages, but I might have certain disadvantages. Like, I'm here in LA. As a male, I might have certain advantages, but as a female, I have way more advantages in so many different ways. In so many different, like in the porn industry, in the movie industry, and just here in LA, right? There's so many industries here where I have so many I have so many disadvantages because I'm a male, right?
Yeah.
If I were a hot female, it'd be a totally different story, right? So it's really
be like selling your ass. Sure.
Yeah, but even then, it still wouldn't be as good as if I were a female call girl, right? So the problem is, it's all too nuanced, and the radical feminists or the fourth wavers or whatever word you want to use, they totally have gotten rid of the concept of nuance. But the original feminists, the first and second wave feminists like Paglia, and the first and second wave critical theorists, all were focused on the nuance of things and how power disparities really show up in a nuanced way, and that's totally gone. It's just totally off.
I would largely argue with that. Like, I think you would be very, very surprised by how terrible feminists always were. But that's a very long discussion. I could send you info about that.
I like how Paglia talks about the nuanced dance of sexuality that occurs between men and women. It's not like, for example, well, I'm not going to give examples, but there is kind of a nuance there in terms of how men approach women, and these days that kind of nuance is being taken out of it, and so it's like hitting on a female is tantamount to rape or something like that.
Right.
Well, sexual assault, I should say.
Which is insane.
But before that though, it was it was just, stop, but stop, but don't stop, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm not coming off like a creepy rapist.
Baby's pulled outside. Yeah.
Does the concept of a word being uttered mean the exact opposite of what it's saying?
Sometimes it can.
Yeah. Just like sarcasm. It happens all the time.
Exactly.
Game. Yeah. So when are you playing a game and when are you not playing a game? Right? Yeah. Right.
And the game is what makes that dance of sexuality fun and actually worth playing. That game is what makes sexual interaction between men and females, or between men and men, or who the fuck ever. It makes it fun. Yeah. And then so now the fun has kind of been taken out of it, and it's become like a really cold, gray, I don't know, business-like enterprise.
Which is insane.
So would you, just as a general, kind of blame the persistent war on men, the selective empathy that is extreme for women? You know, like they look at a crying woman and they're like, "What can I do? Where can I donate to your Patreon?" You know, and like all of that stuff, and then like all men are predators. You would just mostly boil that down to the loss of the nuance and this focus on this war.
Yeah, I would say that loss of nuance is a huge problem because one of the things that I think is particularly sick is academics are not thinking and talking in nuance. And these are the people that are shaping generations of people, right? So we started to lose nuance in the 60s and 70s. And it started to just gradually disappear up until the 90s when critical discourse analysis really had like a foothold on things. I mean, it's really sad that people who are supposedly supposed to be thoughtful, intellectually honest, are kind of ideologically driven. So as soon as ideology started to take over again, like it did back in the 30s and in other periods in time, I mean, everything's cyclical, right? Like there were plenty of periods in history where ideology took over and then nuance came back into favor. And it was kind of a dialectical tension between the two.
Okay.
So we're all pushing back towards like, let's get back to a less ideological, more nuanced way of looking at the world, and it will shift.
Kind of like the argument of the pendulum swinging back and forth, right?
Right, exactly, and it's the same thing. There was a time when it was really pro-male and pro-female, and it will always go back and forth. I don't worry about history kind of, let's say, marching on. I think we'll be okay. It's just a matter of making sure that everyone works in a concerted effort to be more reasonable.
Okay.
Do you mind if I ask what your opinion is on, I mean, as a psychologist or psychiatrist?
Psychologist.
As a psychologist, can I ask you what your opinion is on the APA's guidelines for practice with men and boys?
Absolutely. In fact, there is a YouTube video that I put out that answers literally all of your questions and literally deconstructs all of it.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, let's
I
not
highly
even go
recommend
there.
you go
Cool.
watch that video.
Cool. Because
highly recommend.
there was
I
another.
tore it to shreds.
There was an. Oh, no, awesome. There was another question. That I had asked. Well, it was about people who overcompensate with issues because of their own bigotry. And so that could be anything, you know, like if people have issues with gay people for some reason, like maybe they always hated gay people, but then they had a, gay cousin and they realized, and then they're like, oh, I gotta, be a good ally or something, but they still are, that type of thing. And God, I don't remember the specifics of the question because I said some other stuff.
You were talking about racism in Seattle and how white people are racist against white people because they treat black people like they're basically, feeble, and you can't offend them and you can't ask them anything and say anything without offending them, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like to refer to Seattle as the land of white people talking shit about white people to impress other white people.
Absolutely.
Ironically, black fragility, right? If that's, I guess that would be racist to say, but like there is an element of black fragility regarding the concept of race.
Well, let's see. So let me make a more broad point.
Okay.
Okay. If you'll indulge me for just a second. So if you take any person as a clinical psychologist and you're working with them and they have a history of, let's say, trauma or anything that you would say they've been victimized, right? They've been sexually assaulted. They've been physically assaulted. They've been badly emotionally abused or badly physically abused or neglected as a kid, right? Whatever it is. So the standard evidence-based treatments for any of these trauma conditions or victim conditions has literally nothing to do with making the person continue to think that they're a victim and you should walk on eggshells around them. There's no credible therapist or psychologist of any degree, any age, any intellect who thinks that makes sense. Your goal when you do something like prolonged exposure therapy or narrative exposure therapy or any kind of exposure therapy, which is the gold standard for, treating trauma or victim issues, is to help the person collaboratively with the therapist develop a safe relationship, understand how these things affected the way they see themselves, how safe they feel, how much agency they have, how strong they are, how capable they are, and then work them through mutually negotiating at every step of the way let's face this stressor at the lowest level. You build what's called a fear hierarchy, and you work all the way up to the most nasty, gross thing that they've been through, and you help them face it and understand it and manage it and develop a sense of, I can manage it right now.
Okay.
Right? All these social justice warriors and all these critical theorists and feminists and all these people who are basically infantilizing entire groups of people by saying, you're a victim, you're helpless,
Yeah.
are not doing anything that any sane therapist would do with a victim of any kind of assault, of any kind of injustice.
Yeah, people who say rape is worse than death, and it's like, okay, first of all, that's really arrogant, considering I'm pretty positive you haven't ever been dead.
I feel like being dead would be a lot worse.
Yeah,
Or better. Who knows?
Fucked in the ass. I mean, I just say this as someone who's been fucked in the ass. I feel like dying would be a lot worse than that.
But even despite that, the problem is that they're literally teaching people to be victims. They are reinforcing
and staying
victims,
staying victims,
which is insane.
Yeah.
The last thing I want for any of my patients is for them to continue to see themselves as currently victims. I want them to understand that at one point in history, they were victimized. And that they need to own and understand and accept and acknowledge and make sense of and process and come to terms with and grieve that their identity is forever changed because of that thing that happened. And then we can create a new identity where you are no longer a victim to that thing that happened to you.
How long, though, does it take to actually metabolize trauma?
I can't tell you. I mean, there's evidence-based treatments that are 16 sessions or 24 sessions or whatever, but that's bullshit.
I've heard it's like 10 generations, like in reference to like slavery and shit like that. Like, at what point do people have to get the fuck over it?
If you find a serious scientist of any sort who says we definitively know something, you automatically want to run away from them.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, science isn't governed by consensus, I suppose, which I guess is why some aspect or some elements of the APA are complicit in the torture of like Iraqis, right?
Right. Interesting that there was a political motivation for them to support that, and then all of a sudden they got criticized for it, and they said, no. We're not for torture. I'm sorry.
Well, that same outcry didn't occur when it came to the guidelines for men and boys. I think it's interesting.
Well, I mean, everyone went after it. Everyone went after it.
That's true. No, you're right. I mean,
yeah, everyone did.
People who are within the manosphere.
Okay, I do want to veer it back towards finishing the question about overcompensation.
Sure.
Because
it's normal.
It's normal.
It's normal. We do that when we feel like we are about to either lose status, in the evolutionary psych sense. When we feel like we're about to lose status, we will automatically do something to make sure we maintain status.
Okay.
So if maintaining status in the culture that you live, because it's all culture dependent, like your hierarchy is not the world or the United States, it's actually the culture of the people that you live in. Mm-hmm. So if you're in Seattle, and the way that you maintain status in Seattle is by self-abnegation or self-denigration, by saying I'm a bad white person, then that builds you status. So you do that.
Now, what does this have to do with what you were talking about with trauma?
So the idea is that victimhood is a status symbol now, which is insane.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like the idea of being a what do they call them? What is it? People who claim victimhood status as a means of gaining a career. There's a term for it. It's
professional victim.
A professional victim, yeah. Like Sean King, for example.
Yeah.
I know it is.
He's a fake black guy.
Yeah, he's not black. He's white. He's a white guy. I mean, but he takes black and white pictures of himself so that you can't tell what race he is exactly, and so it gives him plausible.
Okay, who's the more obvious example? The white chick.
From the ACLU.
Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah.
Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah, gosh. What a sick
man,
person.
that's like a full body cringe.
What a sick person.
Well,
she needs so much help.
Like with me, I was platinum blonde when I was a kid. Now I'm like ginger with blonde.
Oh, I called that. I called that before you even said it. I'm just pointing that out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you read that Milo Yiannopoulos article about the ginger jihadis?
No.
Like about how the ginger people were apparently like they had more of a propensity for committing acts of terrorism.
Yeah, well, I'll fuck you up if you keep giving me trouble.
Talking shit about gingers. Sorry, okay. I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay.
Like a South Park episode.
But my dad, like ethnically, I'm almost entirely English. But my dad he's a quarter Mohawk, so he's just native enough to be brown all year round. And
you better get a DNA test on that, man. Like Elizabeth Warren, she was
okay.
saying the same thing, and then she got a hard wake up call with that. Hiawatha
You say that, and then there were a lot of insecurities about parental. What do you call it? Paternity fraud.
Paternity, yeah.
Well, I live in San Antonio, Texas, and like a lot of people, like in the vicinity, like in Oklahoma and around there, white people in particular, they say that a lot, but few people actually get DNA tests to verify that.
Yeah. Well, he and I. First of all, I haven't spoken to him in years.
And there is such a thing as the $5 Indian, which was a period in history when you could just pay $5 and get Indian ancestry, and so to get tax benefits and shit like that.
Yeah.
That guy, the Indian who cried because of pollution.
Yeah, he wasn't. He was Sicilian.
He was a quote unquote $5 Indian who was grandfathered in under that premise.
Huh. So I kind of want to veer it back towards the actual, like, this mass hysteria thing, and I also definitely really want to get to talking about the recovery system that is used for drug and alcohol stuff, because apparently it is based on the work of bell hooks, who's literally the most awful. I mean, there's worse feminists that have existed in the past, but she's quoted them non-ironically.
Can I say cunt on this platform?
Don't.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So yeah, just to bring everybody up to speed. Last time we were talking.
Oh, and I'm gonna mute myself and turn up the volume loud because I have to go to the bathroom. Okay.
I talked last week. I talked about being an alcoholic and having been through the mental health and addictions.
Oh shit, we were talking about AA tonight, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's and I am drinking.
Perfect.
Yeah, the mental health and addiction system here in Alberta, well, everywhere as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get mental health help, go to the private sector.
Sure.
Don't spend the money. Don't go to the government shit, because it's all bell hooks. It's all AA.
The Duluth model, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm interested to hear what you have to say about the Duluth model.
Well,
I know you keep saying call me Patrick, but I feel like because you have academic credentials, I should call you Mr. Lockwood. I don't know, or Dr. Lockwood. Are you a doctor? Is it DR?
Yeah, it's DR, and I don't honestly care.
I didn't go to college for 4 years to be called Mr.
I'm not that guy. I'm from the South. I don't give a fuck.
The South of what? America?
Yeah, I grew up right on the Missouri-Arkansas border.
Oh, shit.
Area.
All right, wow. Well, okay, cool.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can speak to your lived experiences in treatment up there. I can speak to my experience doing addiction treatment, because that's my specialty, is addiction treatment. So what I can tell you about at least AA in the United States is that it's not based on the bell hooks model of things. It's based on all of the classic, like, Oxford group, very moralizing, very ancient, like, Christian way of viewing the world.
What is the success rate?
Can't know that. If there's a person whom you meet who tells you that they know the success rate of AA, they're lying to you, because there's no solid research.
I had a friend who got busted for growing marijuana here in San Antonio, and he part of his sentence was that he had to go to these NA meetings for like a year or two. Yeah. And I went with him for about a year, and he had to go to AA meetings, but it was his choice to go to NA or AA or whatever. Yeah. And so we went to some of the NA meetings, and I noticed that they were particularly more fucked up. Like the people in NA are fucked up because they're like sucking dick for crack. They're like doing horrendous things for drugs, as opposed to like an AA where they're just, at worst, they're probably like getting fucked up and passing out, or like slapping their wives or something, which, you know. It wasn't as bad in an AA, as opposed to the drug world.
It's all like subjective. I mean, you could go to any of 1,000 meetings in the United States and see very different like distributions of people, because meetings are just collections of people.
They smoke a lot.
Oh yes, they do. The joke is you get sober and you trade one vice for two. You stop drinking and you start smoking and drinking a lot of coffee, which is all insane. Because I would argue that most people aren't technically sober. I would argue that most people are not dependent upon alcohol anymore if they're going to AA meetings, but they're still acting out in addictive ways. They're still coping with nicotine. They're still coping with caffeine. It's not the same thing. And I have a giant debate with people in my profession and AAers, 12-steppers, about like the difference between clean and sober.
Given that we're on a social media platform, I mean, I think it would be important to mention that one of those things, at least neurologically speaking, in terms of the recent science or the recent studies that have been done, social media is one of those one of those things that is one of those addictions that people have been. Sorry.
Yes,
and so I'm kind of trying to parlay this into a question as to what you think the effects of social media are on the social discussion.
Sure. I mean, we're designed to compulsively relate to people, right? Because we desperately need people in order to survive, because we're tribalistic creatures. So you have a mechanism like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is, where you can have automatic, intense emotional reactions to people and connect with people so quickly, then you're going to more compulsively use that system compared to you meet someone at a coffee shop, right? So it's designed to hijack us. That's one of the points I made in my book.
Mm-hmm. Is Prince taking a shit, or how long does it? Are you there, dude?
He's somewhere, I'm sure.
It's goddamn.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. I thought. I don't know if you were back or not.
Oh no, I'm back. Okay. And I also actually missed. So did you say that there's no uniform AA and NA treatment? Like it's not all this weird feminist thing?
It's impossible, because every meeting is very different. Every meeting has more of a, like, you're more likely to see representatives of that particular culture where the people live in that AA meeting than the pure principles of the program.
Okay. Yeah, because a gay guy that I know was going to meth addiction, but I think it was also AA. And he... it was something with mostly gay guys, and it didn't sound like, I mean, it sounded bad to me. Like it didn't, like they told him things like it works for everybody as long as you stay in, and it's like, well, how, it's like, no, there's no way that's true. I've known people that it has not worked for, and like they're telling him all this like very grandiose things, and
yeah. I mean, and there's tons of, I would call that a fear-based mechanism to get people to participate. Like, you wanna sell it as if it's like the best thing since sliced bread. And the truth of the matter is, almost anything will work if you consistently do it. But the problem for most of us is that we're more or less sensitive to different interventions, right? Because
do you think it's like religious in nature?
Of course it is. It's built on the Oxford Group model. Now, you go to different meetings.
Religious in nature.
Pardon?
It's unquestionably religious in nature.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Well, I agree, but it's just like when I talk to people in the AA, they for some reason resist that idea when I bring that up.
Yeah, that's because they're fucking brainwashed.
Yeah.
It depends. There are some meetings where there's atheist meetings. It depends. So
the guy that I knew was brainwashed by it.
I wonder what the rate of success is within the atheist meetings.
I don't know.
Versus those within the non-atheist meetings.
The person that I knew would have.
I feel like I have you at a disadvantage because I can't. You're not looking into my eyes. It's weird.
Okay,
I only have an avatar.
You can just gaze at my receding hairline. That's fine.
Dude, I've got the horseshoe going, so don't worry.
Okay, the person that I knew, he was very insistent that it worked for everybody, and that it was not a weird, creepy cult, and he believed everything, and blah 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 blah, and he was very, very positive about it, and would get very offended if I would say that I didn't, like if I would say, well, yeah, maybe in a number of years if you drink again. He's like, that's not gonna happen. And I'm like, I've known you for a while, and I have a feeling, like, I'm not saying you're going to be doing meth, but I have this feeling that you will someday drink again. And I saw a picture of him. He was always very, very thin, and now he's put on considerable weight. And I kind of feel like it's not so much, I don't think that it's the meth at this point, because that was, years ago now that he went to treatment. I think it's probably that he eventually started drinking. That's my guess.
Yeah, it's hard to put on weight when you're on meth.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. So, just like any church, right? So you've got the religion, which is the set of principles, and then you've got the people who adhere to the religion. So all of their fucked upness, whatever that is, clinically speaking, right? All of their neuroses, their issues, their childhood bullshit, their acculturation, their family shit, whatever it is going to be brought to that religious ideology. So just like a gun sitting on a table, it's not going to hurt anyone. But you put a sick person in a room with that gun, they're going to go murder people. It's kind of the same principle with a lot of religion. If you have a very, very sane person in a room with a religious book, or an AA, I have like one of the blue books up in the top there is a 12-step book. It's an AA.
How do you differentiate someone who's sick versus someone who's sick and highly functional?
How much time do you got?
Because that's what religion is.
I mean,
that's the people who ascend to the top echelons of those religions. I mean, they're sick, but they seem to be highly functional.
Right, exactly.
Right now, you
explain to me, Daddy.
You got a psychologist asking you how much time you got. I can tell you right now, 0 difference. There you go. Right now.
I like it.
Well, I mean, you're saying there's 0 difference from someone who's like a non-functional psychopath, let's say, from a functional one, or what exactly are you saying?
I mean, you can talk about the shades of gray, but it's at the end of the day, at least for our conversation, the pragmatic difference is, are they causing direct, serious harm or not? That would be the serious conversation I want to have with you guys. So there are some AA meetings, just like there are some churches, which are terrible. They do terrible things. They say hateful things. They're very cult-like. But then there are some, like, I'll give you a personal example. So I grew up in southern Missouri, and I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. I grew up in a very nice group of people. They were very loving. They were kind of on the love side of the religion, not the hate, brimstone, and fire bullshit.
I actually just moved back from Springfield.
Nice.
No, not nice.
No?
Fuck Springfield.
Okay, well, fuck Springfield. Whatever. But what I'm trying to say with my story is, I grew up with a group of people who I would never think twice about getting hurt by, yelled at, condemned. I would never worry about any version of hate speech or anything, because they just didn't care. They were the right kind of religious people that I grew up with. So I was very fortunate. Just by happenstance, I grew up in a culture in an area where they focused on the good parts of religion in the Southern Baptist kind of point of view of life.
What are the good parts?
So the idea of love and tolerance and acceptance, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So they were that model. But there are tons of like really sick, gross religious people who are very hateful and knew nothing about Jesus and all that good stuff, right? So there's good examples and bad examples and everything in between. I just happened to grow up in a lucky circumstance where they were very, very nice people, and they didn't care to oppress or say anything nasty or mean. So you can find the same thing in the 12-step world. You can find people who are thoughtful, reasonable, who understand the idea of, like, you're not in control, right? It's a very reasonable thing to say that you're out of control when you start drinking. That's not unreasonable. What's unreasonable is to say you're perfectly helpless all day, every day. And that's where you get the religious people.
Can I ask you, just because I sincerely don't know,
yeah,
what is the hierarchy of AA? Like, in terms of who runs the meetings and who, like, is it an organization? I mean, what is the...
It's all self-run.
There is a head office.
Yeah.
and they do produce canonical literature.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, the big book, etc. Yeah.
And so there is a brand name that a central authority can put on.
Is it nonprofit?
That is produced.
Yeah, it's nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's a good thing overall. I mean, it's a program of principles, right?
No, I think it's okay. So when you say that doesn't mean it's a good thing overall, I think that all mechanisms, religious, political, or otherwise, are doomed to failure on a long
Except
enough.
the ones that are totally successful in our culture today,
No,
right?
I mean,
But everything changes. Everything changes.
Christianity, in in terms of its success, hasn't changed in a very long time. Same thing with, with its competitor Islam or.
Okay,
Judaism.
let's let Nick finish.
Sorry, yeah.
You're gonna have to remind me where I was going before I.
You
were saying that ideologies aren't successful long term.
Yeah, the ideologies aren't successful long term.
All systems fail at some point.
Yeah,
I mean, I would agree with that.
They all fail at some point.
Sure.
All right, great talk, guys. Stream over.
Yeah. No, I had something I was building towards, but god damn it!
I didn't mean to derail you.
God,
I have a tendency to bounce around.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get that. Like, I mean,
okay.
There is a tendency to fail. How can you avoid that?
Wait, maybe he remembered it. Let him talk.
So when I've been to Henwood, which is a 3-week drug and alcohol treatment program here in Edmonton, and I've been to, and that was back in 2015. And I've been to Detox. I was here at Detox about a year ago, the Edmonton Detox Center.
Yeah.
And something it's not 100% of the staff. There are some staff in the government, in the public sector, mental health and addiction system that are very intelligent and they listen.
Sure.
They are a fucking hunted minority. The vast majority is like, it's just the Catholic Church reborn. It's a bunch of fucking low IQ functionaries. And I mean, like, they will give positions to people who are obviously intellectually impaired. Like,
sure.
Like, I'm going to use the word.
If I can get their number, just hook me up with a phone number. Like, I would like a position.
Sorry?
He made a joke.
Hook me up with a phone number. That'd be great. I'm a fucking janitor.
Yeah, no. They won't let you in. They won't let you in. They can ill afford another Jordan Peterson, right? The mental health system, right? I mean, and they've
like another nice Canadian.
The mental health system has known that people like Jordan Peterson are there for decades, and they've been. I mean, even 5 years ago, even I'm sure more than 5 years ago, they were clamping down. They were making sure that they would never get another open-minded person in their ranks again. And so they've been awarding all of these positions to people whose only fucking talent is the ability to hum a doctrinal line. All right, and so there's lots of even the people who otherwise would be intelligent in the mental health system, their ability to think has been hobbled. All right, like.
Sure.
Well, this would be true of any particular discipline, though, right? I mean, that's pretty much the goal, right? Like, for example, if you want to become an apprentice electrician, like they pretty much want to fill you up with their shit, right? And then
well, no. It is to some.
Like, how would it differ from any other discipline?
Well, it's probably a little bit more the same as like a social justice or a diversity training instructor.
I don't know what that means.
The people that are the instructors who give
when I hear social diversity instructor, I'm doing already a full body cringe just hearing that.
No, but
it's just like at a university.
That goes into that.
Okay, but you're to bring it back to the point to say that it's the same in any field of human endeavor. To one extent or another, it is. Right. I've met. Like,
what is the difference between education and brainwashing?
Okay. Well, the difference between education and brainwashing is that.
I guess I mean public education. I guess it's it's
okay. There is no
which is the typical one.
Public education and brainwashing. I'll tell you that right now. No, the school system. If you are mandating that children spend every fucking day in a room with 30 other kids the same age and an overpaid babysitter 10 months of the year.
I heard the cringe. I heard the cringe.
There's no difference between that and brainwashing whatsoever. Brainwashing may be slightly more humane.
Well, but see, this is something that kind of bothers me about, and I mean no offense to you, Dr. Lockwood, in this respect, because the psychological profession kind of perplexes me in this way, in the same way that when I brought up earlier how they are kind of complicit in the Iraq war shit. There is weirdly, the APA does not restrict them from engaging in what do you call it, in bad behavior, right? So it's like they could, as a motion of their practice, they can opt to do things that are immoral, so to speak, like but still within the confines of their practice,
You mean like chaining autistic teenagers to radiators and subjecting homosexuals to
exactly, there is a weird thing there with the psychiatric profession, not just psychiatry, but also.
You mean people who have declared themselves experts in mental health tend to be given a halo of legitimacy by which nothing they do can be criticized, which in itself inevitably leads. And
I specifically speak about, and when I talk about this, I'm in mind what I'm thinking topically about this transgender. What is he, a 7-year-old here in my own state of Texas, who just the court, I guess it's been kind of recently revamped within the last couple of days, but before that, I mean, the court was giving the mother carte blanche to give this 7-year-old, hormone therapy and make them transgender and shit like that. And that was at the urging of psychologists and stuff. And I don't know, there's like they have a weird carte blanche to recommend various kinds of stuff without having to actually adhere to the confines of what the APA guidelines are. And the APA guidelines themselves are, they're in dispute from people who actually operate within that profession, like psychologists. So I'm just kind of curious.
Patrick, I'm curious. What do the APA guidelines say about? Because I thought that there was actually a lot of stuff put in them about like young people in transition and stuff. Isn't that like a recent development?
I could not tell you what the APA guidelines say about trans issues because I don't trust them to publish anything that's intellectually honest or scientifically validated at all. I couldn't tell you because I don't want to read any of their propaganda bullshit that's ideologically driven. Which is interesting because I'll give the APA credit where credit's due. So on the one hand, they say this nonsense bullshit about dealing with men and boys on their headline or whatever. But then in the same token, they have this very reasonable like set of statements about gay people, where it's not all biology, it's not all sociology. Like, we don't know is basically what they say, which is perfect because we still don't know.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah,
it's
remember
like,
in the 90s they were doing that big search for the gay gene, right? And they never
such
really found that. So now the conversation has kind of shifted over to like hormonal influences in utero and stuff like that. Like
right, and you could say the same thing about trans people. There's a solid body of literature in both animal models and human models where certain in utero experiences around the first and second trimester might fuck with your brain and how it develops, because there are different parts of the brain that are more and less sensitive to testosterone, more and less sensitive to estrogen, et cetera, et cetera. And there's this whole body of literature that I can't accurately summarize because it's not my specialty, but I can just say, generally speaking, that there's a biology component, there's a socialization component, there's a psychology component, there's a temperament component. Anyone who thinks that we know anything about gay people or lesbians or trans or anything like that is full of shit.
It just fucks me up because every time I want to draw upon psychological study and research and stuff, that is what stands in my way from, like, you know, that always stands in my way from the credibility of that. And it's like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, psychology.
All that research tells you, as a social scientist, all the research tells you is one thing about one study at one point in history. That's all it tells you. It tells you nothing about the world at large. It tells you nothing about society. It tells you nothing about human behavior in general. It tells you about one
traps
people
gay. That's all I want to know.
What is a trap? What the hell is that?
No, don't answer it. Just walk away from that question.
Hashtag walk away.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, traps is another word for male to female trans person that doesn't have a operation on the bottom side of their body, and I don't. No one even knows exactly what the question means. It's like no one knows. It's like is it that the person is gay? Is
I'm sorry. I didn't seriously mean to open up a rabbit hole. I was
does it mean that the person who is trans is gay, or does it mean that it's gay to have sex with them or not?
Well, here's the thing for me, and this could just be my personal prerogative, but I don't really care what the label is. I care, are you attractive enough? Do you vibe with me? And will we have a good time fucking? Nothing else really matters. Nothing really matters to me.
Yes.
I mean, I don't care if you identify as a male, a female. I mean, I have sex with both genders or both sexes, so I'm kind of biased in that way. But
I'm the same way. Like, skin is skin. I mean,
if you're attractive,
I'll fuck anything that moves. Just be attractive enough for me to want to fuck you.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Shave your asshole, then we'll talk.
Right. Clean up a little bit.
Okay. So let's get back towards more of a topic. And please never bring up that question again, ever, if you ever come on my channel.
Sorry, I had to. It's just
you've done it before.
I make light. I like to make light. I'm a jokester. I'm a fool, as it were.
We need more humor. Life is too serious.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people lose the humor, and it's just becomes things become. And I think the people, well, Prince, at least I know. I mean, I'm not familiar with this with the other guests, but you know, I think sometimes these heady political topics, investing such a gross amount of time in those topics. I mean, it does take a particular toll, and you have to have an element of self-care in there. And for me, it's humor. I mean, I have to laugh about so much shit just because it's like, and maybe that comes close in contact with like the whole clown world meme or whatever. But you know, you gotta laugh.
Yeah,
you gotta laugh.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're gonna cry, and crying all the time, well, you're gonna end up blowing your brains out.
Yeah, sure.
Not that I'm gonna do that.
So let's
don't do a welfare check on me or anything.
It's not my state.
Let's get back to kind of talking about the sort of the mass hysteria, if we feel like we covered that enough entirely, because I don't really remember if we did. I kind of feel like we didn't, and I find it very prevalent, and like the way that okay, I remember why I was talking about Erin Pizzey so much. Erin Pizzey said that the early feminists who took over the first domestic violence shelter in the world, that they were very, very awful people, and that they were people with clear personality problems, very unpleasant people that didn't like anybody who didn't have the same attitude as each other, what I think kind of happened over time is that more and more of these people wrote, people like Andrea Dworkin, who has some sort of, she's dead, but she has some sort of serious personality disorder or something. She thought that all heterosexual sex was rape. And then Bell Hooks, who is still alive and, was writing through the 90s, probably the 80s, maybe even the 70s, I'm not really sure. But she's someone, she was dramatically physically abused before the age of 5 by her father. And she's just mental. Like, this is somebody who has... I've read a whole book of hers, and it was just so incredibly obvious that this is somebody who has a massively distorted view of the world. And for whatever reason, instead of getting treatment, she's getting book deals. And so I think that it attracts, feminism attracts women with personality disorders because it justifies their way of seeing the world in many cases. And then once people get there and they're surrounded with these people who have personality disorders, it normalizes that behavior with the other people. And so the other people can start to behave like they have borderline, or like they have antisocial personality disorder, or like they have histrionic personality disorder, or like they have narcissistic personality disorder. And do you like what would be a good start for, like, do you feel like you've said about as much as you could say about that, or do you feel like you could say more?
Well, I can add a couple of things. So the first thing I would add is that I wouldn't say it's just diagnosable people. I would say it's two categories of people that probably are attracted to very, let's say, loud and noisy ideologies. The first thing, or the first type of person, is probably just an injured person. Injured doesn't necessarily mean sick, or like chronically sick, or diagnosably sick. They might just be injured, right? So I'm sure there are tons of injured people who like this social justice or radical feminist or whatever.
I think the same thing would be true of a lot of people who are involved in, like, MGTOW.
Sure, 100%. I think injury is what pushes people towards ideology. I think some level of not feeling competent or capable pushes them towards a more certain ideology. So injury is the best way to not feel competent or capable, from what I can tell. So if you're injured, you might want a feminist ideology. Or if you are diagnosably sick, you might like an ideology like that. But that just because you're sick doesn't necessarily mean that you'll go to feminism. You might just be sick. That doesn't even matter. But, I mean, it might attract people who are either sick or injured. That's the first thing I would say.
Okay.
The second thing I would say is, I think what we perceive as mass hysteria is probably only applicable to the online world, because I think if we were to really kind of get outside of the bubbles that we live in, because I live in a very liberal bubble, and if you live in a liberal bubble where a lot of the sickness and injury exists, if you go to where I'm from in Missouri, in all the other flyover states in the United States, you wouldn't see as much sickness or injury. You would see a lot of regular people going about their regular lives. So the mass hysteria It's not really mass in the sense that it's everyone in the world or everyone in the United States or
It's
everyone
more-
in Canada.
It's more like endemic.
Yeah, it's endemic to a particular group of people. That group of people who self-selects to social media, etc.
Talking about the quote-unquote echo chambers that exist online.
Right.
I think it's a bit more extensive than that.
Okay.
All right, fine. God damn it.
I mean, okay.
No,
I could see it at universities too, but I can't see it literally everywhere in small town USA. You know what I mean?
Well, but do you think that there is an issue there, in universities in terms of indoctrination? And,
Oh yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
do you think that they? I mean, I think that's. I don't think. I mean, I know that that's become more of an issue in recent years in terms of like the liberal indoctrination of students on campuses, right?
Sure,
Is
absolutely.
that something that you personally experienced? I mean,
So I've had a couple of back and forths with some social justice kind of students at the university where I teach. Thankfully, they've mostly been resolved peaceably. I'm decent at not being too much of an asshole, but sometimes I am. So, generally speaking, I've been able to get away mostly scot-free.
don't
Now-
snicker. Whoever that was, don't you dare snicker.
Somewhat of an asshole.
Sorry, I released carbonation from a 2-liter pop bottle. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. But yeah, it's definitely a problem at most universities. I think I'm friends with a lot of academics on Twitter, and the general trend is, the truth of the matter is you have classes that should not exist at the university that you have to take.
Yeah.
So you have to take
Like lesbian dance theory or whatever.
No, you don't have to take that, but you have to take something like, examining your privilege. There are classes you have to take.
Yeah.
at many
Yeah,
universities,
yeah, how basically
Oh.
how not to rape.
Yeah.
which is insane.
So
Which is insane.
You can say that you don't see it on the ground.
I can speak of that as the truth here in UT Austin. At UT Austin, they require male students to do
But
that.
remember, the college is just a subset of the population. Not even half of the population goes to college. It's just a subset of the people. But the problem is that
But
subset
I think that
goes
the
and
college
runs-
does represent an accurate proportion of the
Wait,
population, because they just it used to be that you had to be exceptional to go to college. Now they just
And-
accept anybody.
okay, I think that Nick was trying to say something.
Sorry.
No, he wasn't.
You don't.
No, I'm
you
kidding.
You don't need 100% of the population to be indoctrinated into something for that indoctrination to be endemic. You just need 10%.
Yeah.
If you have 10% of the population that's highly organized, they can lord that organization over the rest of the 90% that is not organized as well
Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
so
Absolutely.
I'm not giving you shit. I'm just saying, okay, you can only see the really hardcore religious ideology here and there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's not gestating further, like with our tax money all the time.
Yeah.
Well-
And just because you can't obviously see it here and there doesn't mean that it's not going to be present at your job. I used to work for Greyhound,
Yeah.
and we had a
Do I
human
know you?
department that like almost any other human resources department in any corporation in North America is going to function as a fifth fucking column.
Yeah.
Like
Eratas, man, Eratas.
they may be few, but they are highly organized.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer the questions that were being asked earlier, what makes a person join?
Hello?
Join?
I think
Heaven's Gate. I think he was talking about Heaven's Gate.
Their own.
Oh, you dropped out for about.
I
10
missed what
seconds
you
there.
said.
Can you-
What'd you say?
People join these fucking cult-like mentalities because they're made to feel like they're not enough on their own.
Sure.
That on their own, they cannot tell the difference between true and false.
Yeah.
That on their own, they can't decide what values really matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we were already talking about like religion and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like that pretty much parallels the idea of the cult-like mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Nick, it's the idea that we've lost the sense that individuality matters, which is something that Jordan Peterson has been harping on for a long time. So there's a necessity to understand the dialectical tension between your individual self and how your individual self works in a collective. But if you don't have a very strong sense of who you are as an individual, even though that's changing, then you're going to be more prey to groupthink and group ideology, so that you feel like you're found. Because the number one thing we want as mammals is to feel seen and understood by people. But if you don't understand yourself, you're going to dramatically look to the outside world, much like an infant would. Infants look to the outside world, mom or dad or whoever's there, to kind of figure out who they are, how they're being mirrored by the outside world. And if you don't feel very found...
Is this kind of like the Piaget kind of view of how people develop, particularly between like 1 and 5, right?
Yeah, I mean, 0 and 5 is the most critical. 0 and 8, honestly, is the most critical period in a creature's development if you're a human. And if that doesn't go too well, if better than chance, then there are going to be some serious problems for people later on. And
so can we take that a little bit further then? Like, what about trannies? I mean, the idea of a self-acclaimed identity.
So the problem, again, with the whole sexual identity, sex identity issue is... compared to like attachment style and other things, there is a pretty strong in utero component that we can't really control for. That, I mean, you can do things to decrease stress for the mother in the womb and all that stuff. You can do things like that. But even then, you can't necessarily perfectly predict and manage in utero issues. And there's no reason to say that you wouldn't want to. Like, I can't think of a good evolutionary reason why you wouldn't want trans people. Because it's part of every species on the planet, basically.
Because they're annoying and they're destroying the gay community?
Ideology. I don't...
Sorry, yeah. I'm being hyperbolic, but it's like...
I'm friends with, and I have had sex with a number of trans people who don't care, and who are not ideological. The point of the matter is, it's the ideology is what's destroying people. And I can't see a good evolutionary reason why you wouldn't want this diversity of sexuality where there's like this normal curve of like 1% is this kind of sexually divergent, and then the vast majority of people in the middle are either mostly straight or mostly gay.
I think the problem comes in, like, we're not talking about 1%. We're actually talking about like a fraction of 1% that wants to, and coming back to this thing that's happening in Texas with this kid, it would seem as if they are trying to increase the instances and like the transgenders and stuff. Instances, like, they're trying to increase the instances of this transgender ideology where it really doesn't exist or doesn't have any value.
So here's a word I want you all to hold on to for the rest of your life. So in psychology, back in the 80s, I forget the name of the author, but there's this author who came up with the concept of what we call a pseudo-event. So, and he was talking about news articles, etc., that he was studying. So the vast majority of what we see and what we read are what I would call pseudo-events. They're not really meaningful. They're not really going to change society in any meaningful way. This kid who has got a sick medical doctor mom and a seemingly supportive dad who's trying to, like, keep him from getting transitioned, that's what I would call a pseudo-event. It's not really meaningful. It's not going to help the trans movement. It's not going to hurt the trans movement. It's not really going to mean anything. But it got blown up because it's been going on for a long time. But we just now heard about it because
we're not talking just about one event, though, right? We're talking about like several years of this whole transgender narrative being kind of pushed into something that it's not.
There's a narrative being pushed.
It's like a pseudo-generative event.
There's a narrative being pushed by a group of people who are ideologically possessed. But the actual number of people who are in these very trying circumstances, like this little kid who's 7 years old, is not very many. It's very, very few, right? So trans people represent less than 1% of the population, basically speaking. And the percentage of them who actually are going through this kind of horrific childhood circumstance is probably 0.1% at best. So it's not really a thing that we should worry about in the sense that it's like a massive problem. But we're triggered by it because that's how back to my book, that's how the 24-hour news cycle works. And that's how, if we've got a gap for 5 minutes and bad things are happening, we have to fill it with something. So here's the next thing we're going to fill it with. Which is this.
Would you say then that there is a conflict? Do you even agree that there is a conflict between the gay community, the gay and lesbian community, and the transgender community?
Sure, 100%. But I'm not saying it's not the end of the world. The gay community is not going to magically disappear.
Oh, it kind of is really. Okay. So, are you looking at? Could you watch the video on the screen right now? Because I've been showing some example of
I can only see Dr. Patrick.
I can't see anything.
I want to call you Doctor.
Yeah. Go to my
Whatever.
YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel, and then watch it there because I'm screen sharing. Because I want you guys to look at some of these people.
Yeah, but again, if it's just some people, that's not representative of the world en masse, though.
Well, no, hold on. Let me just explain it. These are.
I see some chick with her fat tucked into her jeans like an asshole. Like
so these are people who self-identify as non-binary. The majority of people who claim to be non-binary don't transition.
Look at some of these.
That term, I think I used to know what that term meant, and now it's been so overused that I've completely lost all meaning to that term.
So they identify as non-binary, but most of these people who identify as non-binary, like, they're gonna find some photos of, very interesting looking people, but most of them are a bit like, you're like, what? No, this is, and here's the thing, these people who look just like women, who are biologically women, and if they have transitioned, they actually did a very good job of making it look, pretty real. But most of these people are just biologically female, call themselves non-binary, and here's what they do. They take over every gay male space. It's for some reason it's these ones, like these women who
and biological female space.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. But that's like largely the male to female trans people that are like demanding some sort of inclusion.
They are disproportionately the majority of transgender people, right?
So here's what's interesting.
I don't know if I would say that, but here's the thing: they go to gay male spaces first. They demand inclusion because it's for them to supposedly, and they're queer, and they even say that they're more oppressed than gay men because, of course, they're trans, even though they're, that's very beyond arguable. And then they start making all the rules, and like all of the social justice rules, they're like the little enforcers, and they start banning men who don't, and it happens all the time in certain places. And so that is a problem, and now gay guys like barely go to bars.
Apparently the split is like 80-20. It's like 80-20.
What is?
I don't know. What's split?
Male to female versus female to male. Like it's disproportionately male to female.
It's probably people who are actually going.
Like it is overwhelmingly the majority.
Okay, it's probably because half of the people who say that they're female to male, they don't do anything to transition at all. There's a ton of
I believe that absolutely. I'm just simply stating that, like.
Yeah, you just looked it up.
The transgender, I did, yeah, absolutely. The transgender rates are disproportionately male to female.
And I would definitely go watch Benjamin Boyce for interviews with trans people about this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Most comprehensive.
I did a very comprehensive interview with Benjamin Boyce, and we had like a good 15 or so minute conversation about this very discussion.
Yeah,
and it's disproportionately male to female, and they also present a very pornified version of what females are. It's like the idea of what females are, and it's like they're doing a parody, or they're pretending what they think females are.
Sure, but again, I think the question for me comes down to how worried should we be? Right, that's the question I'm trying to kind of flesh out with y'all, and I don't have a solid sense of how worried we should be yet. And the reason I don't have a solid sense is because what I've heard and what I've learned from the people around me and from my other friends in other states and other countries is that it's a very small group of people who are making a lot of very loud noises. And to Nick's point, yeah, a small group of people can mobilize and cause a lot of hell. That's exactly what happened with Hitler and Mao and every other demagogue that's ever existed on the planet in history, for sure. No
I see it
denying
more
that.
on the level of having like a Frankenstein monster in your community. Like they will do so much damage.
but here's the problem for me is that I have this suspicion that once these people start getting what they really need in terms of treatment and therapy and stuff like that, they're probably not going to be much of a problem in the next 10 years. So the ideology will die down. But the problem is the ideology has nothing to do with trans people in the first place. It goes back to the problem of critical theory. It goes back to the problem of this instant gratification culture where we have to automatically relate to each other and feel like we connect with each other, which is bullshit. So there's all these different problems that are kind of, I would call endemic or systemic that we have to deal with. And
interestingly enough, those people who are the main proponents of critical theory, like and also postmodern, having an age of consent law that didn't go past the level of the infant,
which is weird.
It's totally fucking weird, and there are people who are getting deplatformed for talking about that. Like it's very strange. And they write about it explicitly. That's the thing. I think that's why in certain circles Foucault is described as like Dr. Evil. It's not just because of his weird baldness, but it's also because of like the ideology that he proposes that also supports this really fucked up premise that underlies this postmodernism that's being spread. And a lot of people don't know this, which is weird. I mean, that's one of the fundaments of it, and a lot of people don't understand who adhere to that ideology don't understand that.
But here's the thing: is that the problem is that most of these people who consider themselves activists of any ilk have no clue where their theory and where their ideology comes from. Mm-hmm. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a philosopher, but I guarantee you, I've read more critical theory literature than most people who are getting degrees in this nowadays, and that's pathetic. It's pathetic that people who are proponents of trans rights or whatever have no clue where their ideas come from. It's just that the ideas exist, the ideas unite people, so we're just going to use them. And that's where the cult thing that Nick was talking about comes into play.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Another aspect of the cult thing that I was talking about, where that comes in is, it's just a small percentage of the population, but that percentage of the population that is unified by their cultish,
basically the vocal minority,
have taken over the mental health industry. Like,
well, now that is dominated by women, as far as I'm concerned, right? Or as far as I know, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean,
the upper echelons, the top. I talked to Dr. Sean Smith, apparently, who's apparently I know that he's a psychologist, but what he was saying was that the upper echelons are dominated by men, but the vast majority of the discipline is dominated by females.
Yeah, the practitioners are mostly females, but that doesn't mean that they're all female feminists, right? I work with a bunch of females who are not feminists at all. Yeah.
It doesn't at all. Just feminists. There are male feminists.
Are they all just whores? I'm kidding. I'm just fucking around. Come on! Ah!
I know.
Nick, there are male feminists. There are female feminists. Nick,
there are male feminists and there are female anti-feminists. Just because an industry is largely female does not necessarily mean it will be largely feminist.
Yeah. Well, 90% of females don't identify as feminist. I mean, that's a fact. We know that.
You know what?
Because they know that it's bullshit, that it's man-hating bullshit.
It is bullshit. It is bullshit. If someone doesn't eat meat, I'm not going to call them a non-vegetarian. Okay? Like,
I'd like to let Nick get to his point.
I'd rather just keep interrupting everybody. It's funnier.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I'm kidding. Please continue.
So, it may just be a small group of people, but I do think that the entire mental health industry is firmly colonized and under the control of the acolytes of bell hooks.
Interesting.
I think that the entire publicly provided mental health industry is 100% SJW bell hooks. Like
I'd be interested
Would
to
you
know
think-
what a
would
psychologist
you
thinks
think
are
that-
the flaws with
would-
Duluth.
Would you think that that's possibly in Canada specifically because Canada is so incredibly feminist?
no, because the
Are
recent
you in Canada, Nick?
the recent guidelines about
Oh, I'm sorry.
toxic masculinity.
Nothing against the Canadian people, but like Canada, like the Canadian government, fuck Canada.
Yeah,
That's a bunch of bullshit, dude.
Because the recent APA guidelines just came out with something about toxic masculinity. So that's American.
Well, yeah, it's in the United States too, to a certain degree. But I'm just and yeah,
Nick, move to
there's-
Canada. I mean, move to the United States, dude.
Well, and
Please.
there's things that have, the feminist dogma that are within it, just things that everybody assumes are kind of true that are ultimately informed by feminism at the root, and many people just don't know that. But that certainly doesn't just apply to the mental health industry. There's all
Isn't it
sorts
true
of
that
things.
feminists try to sucker people in with the talk of equality, right? Because nobody can be
yeah.
against equality, right? I mean, no sane person, at least within popular parlance, right? And then they kind of use that to shoehorn in their socialistic bullshit, their extremities.
So ultimately, the actual ideology is immaterial. It's completely immaterial. It's completely irrelevant. As long as you go through the motions of to give an example of this, back in the 2000s, I lived in a house full of people that you would consider Antifa types. Okay.
Like you mean like weak, non-effectual pussies? Yeah.
Yeah, who will join into a swarm mob with a whiff of justification. Yes.
Again, I'm from the South, so it's like we're all about guns and that's not a thing here. That's like a thing in northern states.
the ideological if you want to learn about the political ideology of the black and red, read God in the States by Bakunin, Charles Bakunin.
Who was when you read his material, I mean, he was actually very satanistic.
Yeah.
He actually references that. It's very strange, actually. It's very overt the way he talks about it, and none of his works are actually complete, as far as I understand.
In any case, the black and red, the Antifa, anarcho-communists, or as they were known in the 2000s anyway, the IWW, the International Workers of the World, or the Wobblies, they where was I going with this?
Anarchists are retarded, or is it ANCAPs that are retarded?
No.
Can I say that? Can I say retarded on YouTube? Sorry.
I would prefer that you not. But it's not the end of the world.
Sorry.
But I have gotten hate speech for saying it before.
They say that they say the F word in the comment section, but I remember that was an issue with Sargon of Akkad, so I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah.
What can I say?
I wanna mention. I was gonna say something.
I don't know what to say.
Real quick.
I remembered my point.
Okay.
The point is that these people, they ultimately their allegiance is not to the ideology. Their allegiance is to the cult that surrounds the ideology.
So it's more social. You're saying it's more social than political.
That's tribal.
Entirely. And it comes down to what's wrong with people is that they've been broken down, I believe, systematically by the school system. They've been broken down psychologically, so that they just listen and believe whatever authority tells them is the truth. I think that you look at social justice society, and it's just one big expanded version of the narcissistic family cast of characters.
I'm just curious, Nick. I'm just kind of curious, just from listening to you talk about. I'm sincerely curious. Like, what are you politically speaking? Are you like more of a libertarian mindset, or do you do ANCAP, or what's your thing?
Okay, cool. Let's get to the point. You're still talking, it seems.
No. To answer this question, I'm more ANCAP, more libertarian.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. I have more questions, but please continue.
Yeah, I think that people join feminist or social justice or Black Lives Matter or anything because they've been made to feel like they're not good enough as people, and so they. And that right there is what's called narcissistic injury.
So who will build the roads?
Sorry?
Who will build the roads?
Okay, shut the fuck up, Status.
I'm fucking with you. All right, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. No, but they are more narcissistic, you're saying, in their tendencies.
Well,
they're injured.
Okay, so it's not like...
Does injury increase narcissism?
Yeah, it's not like you've got people who are just born narcissistic. I don't think that there is just a narcissism gene, although there might be, but I don't think there is. I think that it's a result of trauma. You intrinsically that doesn't make the cut, and so you gravitate, therefore, towards some sort of external justifying force. When you look at Protestant Christianity, Protestants believe that they are justified by what they believe. You see the same thing with woke culture. People are justified by their belief that blacks and gays and women and the poor and Muslims and the environment are under attack. And if
they don't believe the gays are under attack, they believe the trans are under attack and that the gays are awful for not helping them enough. Just for the record.
Yeah. If someone doesn't believe all those things, then they are bad. Conservatives are just bad people. The only way to overthrow that kind of moral system is to take their whole understanding of what is good and what is bad and examine it out loud. That's about it.
Okay.
So we're nearing the end of the show. I'm not sure.
There's so many more hours of things. But
next time.
Like, what is the? I mean, we should talk about the morality of populism, right? Oh fuck, man! Everybody! I heard everybody cringe to that. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, next time, if you can schedule a time where we're all sober, then
why?
Yeah, no, very good question. That's a better question than that.
Sorry?
That's a better question. Is why?
Why do we have to be sober?
Yeah, because I say so. I would prefer that in the
Because
future.
I've done a lot of talks while drunk, and let me tell you, it's a lot better if everyone's sober.
Yeah, a lot less interesting too. I'm
you have
sure.
to just listen and believe when I say this.
You have to believe. You have to believe,
just
Peter.
gotta believe.
Okay. So, I'm not sure what else to say. I am glad that we got to go over the topics that we did, as well as we did. We could possibly have gone over some things a little bit better, but
one more thing. One
Okay.
more thing. To Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the main causes of the narcissistic tendencies that we see among people within the social justice crowd, for example?
So I would take what Nick said, and I would just phrase it slightly differently with an emphasis on something that is more psychologically palatable. So narcissism has this like kind of philosophical and social and moral and personality loading to it, and I want to avoid that because it's not really palatable and digestible for people. I would talk about it like shame. So when you don't feel that you're good enough, which is what Nick said, that is the problem. So when you don't feel like you're competent on your own, you're good enough on your own, you're valuable, you have worth on your own, like I said with the infant thing earlier, you're going to go seek out an outside perspective that mirrors how you feel, because that's how we're built as creatures. We seek out the people, kind of birds of a feather. We seek out the people who are just like us. So if you feel gross and you feel feckless and incapable, then you're going to go seek out other people who feel just as feckless and incapable. So if you feel like you're a wimp, you're a cuck of some sort, you're going to go hang out with other cucks. You're going to go hang out with other wimps. You're going to go hang out with other feckless, incapable people. And the best way for someone who feels like they're not good enough because of their sexual identity, they're going to go hang out with other people who feel like they're not good enough for their sexual identity, or for your racial identity, or for whatever it is. So if you feel like you're not good enough, you're not capable, you're going to go hang out with birds of a feather, other people who are just like you, who feel just as bad as you do, right? Kind of water rises to its own level. So I would say it's about shame. I'm not good. I'm not valuable. I don't matter. And my not mattering is kind of my core identity. And my not mattering with regard to sex or sexual orientation or with regard to race or age or gender or whatever it is, that's going to be the thing that orients me in the world.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, because once that orients you, if you're oriented to believe that you're not enough, then of course that's a bottomless pit right there.
Correct.
Right there.
Yeah.
And no matter how many, if you're a woman, no matter how many model photo shoots, no matter how many people tell you that you're absolutely beautiful, will ever fill that up. And so you see this, you see, and like Prince with your most recent video of, my God, the histrionic black trans women. I mean that was
God.
excruciating to watch.
That's
Yeah, it's a video that's exclusively on BitChute. I made an announcement for it like a day or two ago, and so the link is in there if you guys are interested.
Yeah, I watched that video. It's an amazing video.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it talks about. I mean, it highlights histrionic nature and why people need to be the center of attention.
Well, technically, I was saying narcissistic, but
Well, I mean, potato.
okay.
okay. But okay. Anyhow, keep going.
Yeah. You see this. You see these people.
So you're wrong. You're wrong, Nick. Okay.
Well, by God, tell me why.
No, let's let him finish.
Don't you dare say God. Don't you dare say God. Oh my God.
Okay. Regardless,
All right.
I think that
Look. I think we can all agree. Just kill all men, kill all women.
Let's let Nick finish.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no. It's
So once people have been broken down and made to feel inferior, if they've been made to feel that their worth means meeting some standard that they can intrinsically never meet, then until they die, they are going to be attempting to satisfy this need that can never be satisfied. And so they're going to be looking for greater and greater and greater means of satisfying it. So if I don't know, I also have a video that I would like to promote, but
what is your channel?
Yeah, my channel is
Like, who are you on YouTube? What is your channel? I'm not. I don't know what that is.
My channel is non-humanitarian anti-feminism, and if people want to check out the very last video that I uploaded, it's called the feminist non-feminist triangulation spiral, and
Jesus
I
Christ, dude.
It was a good video. I like that.
I'm just that's like a mouthful, but okay.
I map Marxist and neo-Marxist belief systems on top of the Karpman drama triangle.
What is neo-Marxism? I was asking that earlier, and I'm still unclear.
Neo-Marxism is so Marxism is when you look at people in terms of bourgeois and proletariat, and neo-Marxism is when you take is when you take the attributes of proletariat and bourgeois and you apply them to groups like black and gay and trans.
Oh shit! So it's basically just Marxism with intersectionalism attached to it.
Yeah, it's intersectional feminism is postmodern neo-Marxism.
Fuck. That's just that's a dumpster fire. It's messy. It's like a word salad.
It is.
Like,
it's weird. And the reason that people
have
never been people to
postmodern.
I'm not done talking. I'm not done talking.
That's the problem that I have is with postmodern neo-Marxism. Is that it's basically just a word salad approach to applying intersectionalism to other concepts.
Okay. Yeah, but here's the thing. It is a blend of two very complicated concepts, and that makes it word salad. That also
doesn't have to be.
That also makes it hard to understand. I have recommended that people, if they want to talk about, postmodern neo-Marxism, they could just call it intersectional feminism. I've made a whole video where I said that.
I think the easiest way is multiple oppressions. That's like the shit from the 80s, and then it turned into intersectionalism. And then now we've got postmodern neo-Marxism and all this.
But if it was about multiple,
no need for it.
No, but if it was about multiple oppressions, they would maybe have picked something that was like actually true once in a while. Like this, like maybe they would say, yeah, it's harder for men. So we actually have a reason to be looking at the historical root. And Frederick Engels co-wrote the Communist Manifesto. Mm-hmm. And is considered, one of the foundational Marxists. Because he's like almost as good as Marx to many people. He wrote. Going
past that, there was never.
Could you really let me finish? Could you actually just let me finish?
You sound like a what's his name? Fucking who is that politician?
How about you let me finish?
Please do.
Okay, so you have to remember that the reason that feminism became fused with what people consider to be Marxism is that a year after Marx died, Frederick Engels published a book called The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. And it's very, very feminist, and it is the thing that came up with the idea that marriage is a form of state-sanctioned slavery. Men are oppressors, women, it's kind of like applying that dynamic. And so, there's all these different things that came from Marxism that aren't necessarily true. They just have this long tradition behind them. And so we should make the distinction that these things are these are the groups that matter to them. And
by making those distinctions, you're actually playing into their hands and doing exactly what they want you to do. It was bullshit at its outset when they came out with the Communist Manifesto, and you can see that by the actions of the people who wrote it. Karl Marx, he actually raped his maid and threw them out in the street and disavowed the existence of his son, right? And he was actually extorting the product of the labor of the people in the factory that Engels produced. It's all bullshit. Yeah. The idea that we're going to create this word salad extrapolation, stacking upon stacking upon stacking, that's what they want. They want you to do that. And
I think it's actually really
to me it amounts to kind of a waste of time. Especially in terms of men's issues.
Well, I don't think so, because unfortunately, you have to be very precise about what exactly you're talking about to actually
right. But if you have to make an entire video about, if you have to make an entire separate video about postmodern neo-Marxism, you've already lost. You've already lost, and you've lost the point entirely.
I'm not a person that just gives up.
Well, you have to cut your losses at some point, right? It's not about giving up. You do have to make reasonable.
No.
You have to make reasonable. You have to, acquiesce to. I should say, to reasonable expectations at some point, right?
No. I mean, I don't consider that an unreasonable expectation for people to understand this concept and have more people understanding this concept who would be interested in deconstructing it and interested in making more accessible ways of getting across deconstructions to people. But for people first really need to just understand, how these two things are different, how they're similar, and then how they actually work together in practice.
Absolutely, but I think that just contributes to the kind of battle that we're seeing right now with the collapse of culture between meaninglessness and meaning. We're talking about meaningless concepts, and that there are concepts that have much greater meaning that are dying under that.
Okay, well that's
the concepts that I was talking about earlier, and I like when I was talking about traditionalism. This was before the stream even started, but but concepts that underlie that traditionalism, some of them should be discarded, absolutely, but some of them have a much greater deal of meaning. Well, okay. Anyway.
Okay.
The postmodern neo-Marxism thing, I just it seems silly to me.
Yeah, it certainly is silly, but unfortunately it's a real problem. And there's a reason that it has resonated so much with so many people in the way that Jordan Peterson has spoken about it, in particular. I
think it resonates with people because he's popular and he says it. Not because it has actual meaning.
You've got it exactly wrong. It's not popular because he says it. He said something that resonates with the public. That's why it's popular.
That particular aphorism did not approach popular parlance until he said it.
Well, here's the deal. I think he put a word on a phenomenon that people could now make sense of.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to describe it.
Before that, he was just talking about postmodernism, and
he's talking predominantly about postmodernism with people who believe in Marxism.
Postmodern neo-Marxism is it's a word salad. It's a word salad.
Just because something is long doesn't mean that it's not representative of what you're talking about.
The meaning. Well, I mean, you could ask Jordan Peterson what meaning he attaches to it.
I'm pretty sure I understand what meaning he attaches to it, and it's the same meaning I have.
Well, he doesn't explain it. He doesn't make any attempt to explain it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because I follow his content pretty closely, and he doesn't make any attempt to explain what exactly it is. And when he does explain it, it does not differ in any way from his concept of that he has in mind of postmodernism. I don't see the difference.
His real problem is with postmodernism, not Marxism. Because as an academic, he's been infested with the postmodernist critical theory lens of things.
And look, I'm not faulting Jordan Peterson for that.
No, not at all. I mean, he's still pointing to a real problem that everyone can understand.
Yeah. But, okay, so, I mean, it's true, like, if you were to ask me, if you're just going to go ahead and ask me, I would largely say it's fine to just refer to postmodernism, just because the basis of postmodernism was built by Marxists. And that's
really all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. I'm agreeing.
And there is an inherent similarity between postmodernism, which is this like, power structures, the one oppresses the other, and the oppressed one has, inherent understanding and, nobility because of their oppression, blah, 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 blah. That's a part of postmodernism, and it's very obviously informed. It's like very obviously the child of Marxism if you realize where it came from. So
I like this guy in the chat, Terrence Hypno Nipple.
Yeah.
I would like to go henceforth as interruption dude. That'll be my. I'm gonna change my name to that.
He's right. His logic is perfectly correct, because we've always had this Western notion that Marxism and communism is terrible and bad and scary. So that's one reason that Peterson chose that word intentionally. But it's not to say that there's not this resurgence of communist ideology like Marxism that people are, the Bernies of the world are glomming onto. So it's like, it's true and it's not true. That's the problem that we face. But it's a word that we all readily resonate with. That's why Peterson gets away with it.
Yeah, I would guess, and this is just a small guess, that he probably uses it because it's so hard to even really conceptualize what postmodernism even is. Like, it takes a number of sittings to even really quite get what it actually is, and it's so important that people understand the ties to Marxism. So I think that that's sort of what he's doing. That would be my guess, but I don't really know.
Hard to say. Hard to say what Jordan's doing.
I think that postmodernism. I think that. Oh my God! If you're gonna get really esoteric about it, technically, communism could operate under a empiricism, right? As opposed to postmodernism.
Correct.
Where facts are facts, regardless of how you feel about them.
It's a fact that the bourgeois is oppressing the lower class.
Yeah. And it almost universally is a fact that the upper class got there by ignoble means, right?
But wasn't anti-rich bias something like that? That's been the result of mass atrocities in the past, though, like with the kulaks, was it not?
Well, anti-rich bias exists independently of any ideology.
Correct.
I don't see how that could exist independently of Marxism.
Everyone hates the fact that someone has more power than them.
How it's just collective jealousy.
Yeah, we all have.
But that's like I think that's what I think that's what a lot of the current people who I think that's what a lot of the current people who would call themselves communists or even Marxists or socialists, I should say. That's kind of part of that's intrinsically part of their belief is that the rich, like, and then it's actually a very popular quote among them: "Eat the rich." You know, I think there is an endemic jealousy that's kind of part of their ideology.
Yes,
and it's not necessarily warranted. Because people are, and I think there's also a very warped concept of what constitutes rich. If you say make more than $100,000 and own a business, that's not necessarily rich. Like, a lot of that actually goes into the business. Like, people don't have a concept.
I can make it all make sense. I can make it all make sense right away.
Please do.
They're perpetually jealous because they believe they're not enough.
Correct.
Yeah, but I think the issue is that they're not enough. Frankly, a lot of people aren't enough. The vast majority of people are not enough. Okay, I think the vast majority of people are not exceptional. Hence the culture of exception.
Not exceptional and not enough are two different things.
Thank you.
First of all, and secondly, I mean, you look at a lot of, like, we've been talking about postmodernism, but you look at martial arts ideology, and they
I don't, by the way.
About how martial arts often talk about how you can if you believe you can. You know, you are enough if you believe you are enough.
But that's not the truth. That's not the truth about how society operates. Just because you can believe you can do something, you have to be exceptional in some capacity, unless you have some, like, kind of inherited wealth or something. I get that. But besides that, you have to be exceptional in order to achieve exceptional shit.
No, I don't think so. I think that in the world that we live in, I think that a person does not have to. You don't have to choose between being exceptional and being
enough.
Sorry?
Enough.
Enough is like, as in terms of the standard, or
no. There's, you don't have to. It is a narcissist who sees the world in terms of not enough and better than perfect. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's this pathology that people have to be better than average, when in fact average is perfectly noble.
Yeah.
And most people can achieve average with no problem. Most people can have a good life, whatever you want to define that as. Most people, for most of their wants and their needs, the average person on the planet with an average IQ, average strength, average ability, whatever it is, or even below average, can achieve a good life.
Well, I think the question is, what does the average Marxist believe is the average?
Why are we?
I think they have a much higher standard of what it should be.
No, they have idealism. Idealism is never going to flourish. Idealism just serves the purpose of getting people from point A to point B, but not point Z.
You're asking what they believe. What they believe is that on one level is that they are completely unlovable. What they believe on another level to make up for that horrible belief is that they are totally awesome.
Overcompensate, yeah.
I mean, that belief that they're unlovable or that they have these particular limitations is, I think, what limits them from actually achieving their full capacity.
Totally.
Yes.
We really gotta end within the next 2 or 3 minutes. So,
sorry.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think I'll end my shit there. I mean, I think that's
okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope that you enjoy this, and you guys should send me any videos or anything that you wanted people to watch, and I will post it under the video.
Yes,
of the live stream. Yeah.
The latest comment that I'm reading is, "Wow, this stream is still going on."
Right.
Whatever. I would like to be connected with Mr. Ascot after this.
Anytime.
Okay, well, you send each other your emails on Skype, and I will talk to everybody later.
Mr. Ascot is Patrick Lockwood?
Yeah. Patrick Lockwood.
Okay, bye guys.
Yeah, I don't know where an Ascot, I guess.
Bye.